Welcome to Compassion in a T-shirt and our short shares with Professor Paul Gilbert. In this, our sixth and final episode, Paul describes compassion-focused therapy in a nutshell, and then what's next for CFT, not least bringing compassion to the world. Last question, and it's sort of a yes. I'll be interested to hear what you say, because sometimes I find myself with people I'm working with or colleagues or whatever, and sort of I try to give them a kind of a, you know, what is CFT in a nutshell type thing, you know, like the sort of the kind of the little pitch that might begin the sort of the considering of this as an approach or that sort of thing. And so I wondered, I mean, how would you kind of pitch it, or you know, what is CFT really in a nutshell for you? And when I say nutshell, you can still spend a bit of time talking about it, but you know, what is CFT in a nutshell?
Well, it's a great question, isn't it? People do on these things. So there are two things. One is how you talk about it at a party and how you talk about it in a clinic.
Okay.
So talking about it in a party, I would just say, look, you know, we are a species, we're a mammal. We care for our young, and we have things in our brains that make us sensitive to be caring if people are struggling or whatever. And that's basically compassion. And, you know, if we take an interest in helping others when they're struggling, that's it. So that would be a party piece, wouldn't it, really? But then for your clients, what we've found over the years, as you know, Stan, is that we used to invite people to talk us through an example of them experiencing compassion, but we don't do that now. We have a very set piece that seems to work pretty well. We ask them first, the first thing is, what does compassion mean to you when you hear the word? And they say kindness, warmth, softness, tenderness. We say, okay, we're going to put that on one side. Those are ways of being compassionate, but they're not actually compassionate. They're ways of being compassionate. And then we say to them, but you actually understand compassion in a different way. And they say, do I? And you say, yes. So here's the deal. I'd like you to imagine that you have a really good friend. Yeah. Can you bring them to mind? Yeah. What do you like about them? Oh, well, because. Okay. Now imagine your friend phones you up and they say, I've just had a letter to say I've got to go to hospital for this very, very important operation. I can't go. I'm hospital phobic. I've never been able to go to hospital. What am I going to do? I just don't know what to like. And they're very tearful and upset. How would you be with that? And then they say, oh, well, you'd be upset about it, wouldn't you? You'd be worried about it. How would you talk to them? Oh, well, I try to understand their fears. I see. And what might you try to do? Oh, I'd see. Maybe if I went with them to hospital, why would you go? Well, if you've got somebody helpful with you when you're going through pain and fear, then that helps, isn't it? It's just normal. It's just common sense, isn't it? You say, yes. So you were sensitive to their suffering, you try to understand it. You got alongside them. You didn't criticize them or whatever. And then you turned your mind to what you could do to be helpful. And you worked out that having somebody with you that was supportive would be helpful. That's compassion.
There's the algorithm.
We are sensitive to pain. We engage with it. We empathically experience it. But equally, we want to work out what's going to be helpful. We don't just sit there, oh, isn't that terrible? Well, everybody's going to die sometime. So no, we then work out what to do. And that working out what to do is really quite fundamental aspect of it, okay? And it really does depend on the person, wouldn't it? It would depend on the person, it would depend on the situation, it depends on many things. There's no simple solution. Every compassion, every desire of a compassion act might have a different type of act.
The thing I love about CFT is that on the one hand, you know, it's an evolutionary model in a sense, or, you know, that's kind of deeply in there, but it's at the very same time, it's also continuing to evolve, and you're developing it all the time, and the science is really feeding into that and helping us to understand more and more what compassion is and how it can be helpful, and trying to really develop CFT and the application of it. What's kind of next for CFT, do you think? I mean, where is it heading next? What are the sort of the bits that you're most interested in or curious about? You know, any kind of research or practice or anything coming out that's exciting?
Yeah, so I think the two things, the thing that we really hammered, I mean, I've written about this a lot, and it's just beginning to appear in the literatures now. There are two very different types of threat regulation. So you've got one threat regulation system, which is through your amygdala, and that's when you are threatened, you become aroused, okay? So when you engage in safety behaviors, you're working that system. You're working your threat system to either reduce the threat or keep away from the threat. So that's one threat regulation system. But we also know, since attachment, you have another threat regulation system, which when you are an infant and you form a relationship to your mom or father or whatever, when you're threatened, you don't just run away from the threat, you run towards what will help you feel safe, will rescue you, will calm you down. So this is moving towards your social support system, your social safeness system. Now that works through a very different set of regulators. That's the parasympathetic system, not the sympathetic. There are various sections of the orbital frontal cortex and oxytocin and so forth. So that's a very different system. And we know that that system down regulates your primary threat system. Okay. So when that system is going, it down regulates your amygdala. If you do loving kindness meditations for 8 weeks, you down regulate sensitivity in your amygdala. So these are two quite different threat systems, right? Or threat regulation systems. One is moving away from and preventing, that's the amygdala one, but the other one is moving towards that which will calm you, that which will settle you down. And that's that's through the parasympathetic, the social engagement. So when you are, so if you are distressed by something, Stan, you won't just sort of be there by yourself and try and keep away from what's distressing. You'll go to your partner and they'll give you a cuddle and talk to you, and then you'll feel support and that will calm you down. So we're very keen that people really begin to, because most people talk about threat only in terms of threat system, the safety system, not the safeness system, but we've talked a lot about the safeness system, and that's clear. So we're pleased about that. That's becoming more aware now. So the other thing that's really interesting is, how do you take compassion out of the clinic, right? So as you know, we're working with the compassion in politics and compassion in business groups, because unless we get this as a world being sensitive to the suffering and working out what we're going to do, like climate change or viruses or whatever it is, or injustice, we need to become much more sensitive to the suffering in the world and the suffering that our economic systems are producing. Neoliberalism is a destructive system that increases suffering because it increases callousness. If people become more callous, they become self-focused, just interested in their own stuff. It's all about achievement, having and owning and doing. Now, there's some value in competitiveness, of course there is, but actually, even if we look at the vaccine rollout, it's been pretty callous. I mean, still lots of the world don't have any access to it because they're poor. So that's what I'm interested in now, is how do we get this basic motivational system that's in all of our minds? We all have it, right? We all have this capacity to one degree or another, some not so much maybe, but if we can work it as a group, as a society, as a world, then we're in serious business. But if we're trying to do our own thing and just trying to make as much money as we can, and don't care about anybody else, and we just keep our fossil fuels going, and what difference does it make? Then we're in trouble.
We've had an interesting thing here over recent months in Australia, where there was a kind of a push for politicians to have empathy training, which of course immediately piqued my interest, because I know from your work that empathy is a competency that can be used for various motives. And I thought to myself, if we just teach politicians empathy, then they might, who knows what they might bring that skill to. We have to find ways to sort of cultivate the motivation of compassion, the motive there, that we might bring empathy to a compassionate motive, and let's hope that we are sort of moving more and more towards an age of compassion, I guess, because it does feel like the world really needs it.
That's right. I mean, if you go down to your local shop, or you go down to your local restaurants, or just potter around in your local areas, unless you live in a high crime area, mostly people are nice, you know. Most people are quite nice, actually. Humans are designed for hunter-gatherer life. Basically, if you give them a hunter-gatherer type of life, they have fun, they enjoy being with each other, they want to, you know, all that stuff, want to help each other, communities want to help each other. So we know that's the case. But those motives get severely diverted by competitiveness and threat. And politicians are very good at using threat to promote themselves. And we don't really know how to deal with that. The West is dominated by a right-wing media that wants to write stories of threat, shame, condemnation all the time. They do not write stories about collaborations and caring and changes that we're making and how wonderful we're doing in certain areas. They don't write that stuff very much. So we're marinated in this constant world of threats and politicians being useless and they're no good. And so when you keep attacking them all the time, what do? They just close it all down, become defensive, and it's very difficult, you know. And the ones that are attracted into politics are the ones that tend to be a little bit more ruthless. So, you know, it's not really their fault. It's the system that we're caught up in and that generates it. And it's really, how do we change the system? How do we, I mean, if you look at a lot of our entertainment, it's mostly male violence, you know, good guys against bad guys, cops and robbers, you know, James Bond, you know, off to get the bad guys. It's all about the good guys getting the bad guys. We are creating in our entertainment a constant sense of threat, and we need strong people to come in and take out the bad folk. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're watching science fiction programs or whatever it is, it's always the same, in my view, very boring story. You have bad people and then you have the good people that go after them. Very boring. But that's the way it is.
Very, very sort of all about vengeance. And
it's vengeance, yeah. It's vengeance. And that's, I think, partly because we're living in this very competitive society. We're always worried about the bad people. We're always worried about, you know, how are we going to stop them? How are we going to stop the immigrants? How are we going to stop this? How are we going to stop this? It's very sad.
Well, I certainly appreciate the work you're doing. You're certainly taking this very powerful therapy approach and you know, kind of having it writ wide, you know, in terms of bringing it to the world. But Paul, thank you very much for coming on to Compassion in a T-shirt, as I call it, and having this invaluable conversation. Thank you very much.
Stan, it's always wonderful talking with you. I like playing guitars with you as well, but talking with you is great.
Yeah, good. Okay, thank you.